Oklahoma State fans, it is finally our time to celebrate. We will experience Thanksgiving kind of like it's Christmas because the pick is in and Eric Morris is him in Stillwater, America.
You are Locked On Oklahoma State, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma State Cowboys, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
How are we feeling, our Big 12 brethren? Shout out to all the regulators out here. Welcome back to Locked On Oklahoma State, your top stop for all things Cowboy and Cowgirl related. My name is Cody Stovall. I want to thank you kindly for stopping by to make this your first listen. We're available on all of your podcasting platforms, visually as well on YouTube. Find me personally on X at Aldeo State. Today, we're partially brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment matter more, especially right now when new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 back in bonus bets. Make sure that you head on over to the FanDuel app today to get squared away in the bee's knees of all of your betting needs. Now we get to celebrate because Oklahoma State has named Eric Morris as the new head man to replace Mike Gundy in God's country, Stillwater, America. I couldn't be more happy about this. First of all, for North Texas fans out there, you have to take into consideration, this is the first time you guys have been ranked since 1959. Eric Morris and the athletic director have done a remarkable amount for North Texas. And I do think that the Mean Green are definitely on the right trajectory moving up. But this is an inevitability, right? When you're at a lower level, these things happen. When Oklahoma State lost Jim Knowles to Ohio State, yes, it hurt, but at least it was to Ohio State. So it did make some sense. This is not a lateral move. I know some North Texas fans want to kind of put this thing out there. But that's actually so ridiculous. I promise you, we're definitely not offended. As it pertains to Eric Morris being the new dude at Oklahoma State, let's go over some of the statistics as to why this makes sense. Number one scoring offense in the country. They're number 3 in the country in first downs, number 3 in the country in passing efficiency, number 2 offense in the country when it comes to turnover margin, number 29 in America on third down offensive conversions, number 8 in America in fourth down conversions. They're number 11 in the country in completion percentage, number 3 in America in first down success rate, number 5 in the country in interceptions offensively, number 7 in America in red zone offense, 13th in passing yards per completion. They're number 38 in America in rushing offense, and the number 16 in America with the offensive line in sacks allowed. And defensively, yeah, there's a little bit less to be desired there, but it doesn't mean that it's completely a foregone conclusion that that's defense cannot be successful in Stillwater. They're number 2 in the country in turnover margin, number 5 in defensive turnovers gained, number 3 in fumbles recovered, number 19 in the country in interceptions, 13th in passing yards allowed per game at only 166, number 26 in the country in passing D efficiency, and they're top 40 in the country in tackles for loss. Not to mention the fact, right, we've discussed how it's not always necessarily about who might be the best coach, but sometimes it's about, well, what can you bring with you, right? If you can bring a tailor-made coordinator, if you can bring a quarterback and running backs and wide receivers and some defensive dudes after having a ton of success, that has to be part of the metrics here. And clearly, I think that is something that Chad Weiberg was able to narrow down on, is North Texas has a pretty young roster. North Texas has a lot of capable dudes, right? Their best receiver is only a sophomore. Their quarterback is only a redshirt freshman. Their running back, who's an Oklahoma native, he is, I think, either a redshirt freshman or also only a sophomore. They've got Braden Knox, a defensive end on the outside, who is a brand new freshman. A lot of their top talent is on the younger side. So I think that Oklahoma State could find themselves the beneficiaries of not only Eric Morris, but a large complement of some of these dudes. Eric Morris is a offensive guru. He's more of a quarterback whisperer. He discovered the 0-star Cam Ward, which is interesting. Cam Ward didn't throw the ball. Cam Ward ran like a Navy Army style of attack. Yet somehow Eric Morris saw something out of Cam Ward that nobody else in the country was seeing because nobody knew that he could throw the football. John Mateer, he was getting recruited, but not at a enhanced level. He found John Mateer, brought him to Wazoo. Drew Messamaker, he's the guy right now leading the charge, almost 3,600 yards passing. He's only got 4 interceptions, and he didn't start a single game in high school. So this was an individual that nobody was looking at because the dude hadn't played since 9th grade, yet somehow, again, Eric Morris saw something in Drew Messamaker that nobody else in America saw, even his high school coaches. Not to mention the fact that Eric Morris, whenever he left Texas Tech, The first thing he did as a receivers coach at Washington State under his former head coach, Mike Leach, was try to get Baker Mayfield a scholarship at Washington State. Obviously, Mike Leach decided not to do that. But Eric Morris is somebody that has always been visibly capable of identifying talent in areas where every other recruiter in the country didn't see it. So that, from a quarterback perspective, has us chomping at the bit. This probably does affect what happens with Haas Haney and even to some degree Zane Flores if Drew Messmaker is in fact going to come over alongside his coach. And it seems as though the defense coordinator is going to come alongside of him, and there is some connections there. So Cassidy's older brother, Braden, was a defensive end at Oklahoma State. So I do appreciate that there is a little bit of an Oklahoma State connection. Even deeper than that, you have Greg Richmond, the defensive line coach at North Texas. Obviously, it was a famous Cowboy that unceremoniously was let go recently. And it turns out he probably just shouldn't have said what he said in the room that he said it, because he actually was right? All he was saying was that the 3-3-5 under Brian Nardo was never going to work with the roster that we had. He just voiced his opinion to the wrong people at the wrong time, and it got back to Mike Gundy. So I have no doubt that Greg Richmond would like to come back home to Oklahoma State because he never wanted to leave. He was just simply expressing, I don't think this Brian Nardo defense is going to work with the athletes that we have, but nobody wanted to listen to Greg Richmond at that time. So it is kind of ironic that we're now in a position where Greg Richmond could in fact come home, because he was right that Brian Nardo 3-3-5, as much as I love Nardo even to this day, with the talent that we had at the time, it was never probably going to merge the way that we would hoped that it would have. But nonetheless, we get to have this excitement level because there's a ton of teams, right? LSU is going to be viewed above Oklahoma State, so is Penn State, and I think those are fair. But all of these other schools, Arkansas is not above Oklahoma State. UCLA is not above Oklahoma State. Stanford, Cal, definitely not on the same level. Whatever jobs are about to come available in the ACC, it doesn't matter because we got our guy. And that's another big thing here, is there's always been a consensus that these hires aren't typically going to happen until December, because you're going to have to wait on all these other, job openings and hirings and firings and bowl games and playoffs and so on and so forth. Oklahoma State did not do that. We identified some of the guys that we wanted to go after. Fortunately, Eric Morris was probably always on that list, alongside some guys like Zach Robinson and G.J. Kinney. But at the end of the day, Oklahoma State is known for its offense. We talk about fit, right? The only downside to maybe an Alex Golesh is that his geographical footprint for recruiting has not been anywhere near Oklahoma or even Texas for that matter. Not that that's the end all be all, but it's always about fit, right? Eric Morris is a Big 12 guy. Eric Morris has worked with Daniel Holgorsen. Eric Morris could bring over a Graham Harrell. He could also bring over a Seth Dahy. That's another interesting thing. Yeah, it could be plausible that he brings the offense coordinator with him, but at the same point in time, he got to catch passes from Graham Harrell for 3 years. He also got to catch passes from Seth Dahy for a year. So there's a lot of connections. And I think that Seth Dahy would leave Arizona if you were to get a promotion at somewhere like an Oklahoma State. Likewise, Graham Harrell, it didn't exactly work out for him at West Virginia, but they didn't really give him a whole lot of time either. And now he's at Abilene Christian. That would be another individual that he could potentially bring a line coach with him as well. I think that in totality, this is the best move physically possible. And we broke this down. The difference between Eric Morris and Alex Golesh, other than the geographical footprint stuff, was the roster. Oklahoma State is not in a position where we can welcome 70 new transfers. I mean, yeah, we could be, but that would be putting a bigger Band-Aid on a potential bullet hole, as opposed to if you bring somebody in that already has a quarterback that has multiple years available. Same with the running back. The top wide receiver is only a sophomore. A lot of the dudes on the defensive side of the ball are sophomores and juniors. So they're not super loaded down with, senior, fifth-year level senior transfers. That had to be part of this conversation. And is Alex Golesh going to be connected forever to the Big 12? Probably not. Eric Morris always will be. And, the downside to getting Colin Klein is he's likely to leave at some point in time, whether it's 3 years, 5 years, 10 years for Kansas State, right? Eric Morris probably is not going to have the same difficulties because Joe McGuire and Wreckham Tech have this thing rocking and rolling right now to an unprecedented level. So they're not going to be looking to replace Joey McGuire anytime soon. And thankfully, we got to give another shout out before we get to segment 2 here and start getting interactive with the comments. Chad Weiberg, right? The dude hired David Taylor, seems to be a slam dunk. JC Hoyt definitely seems to be a slam dunk. I think what you're seeing with Cowboy basketball is very, very promising. I don't think we can necessarily say Steve Lutz is a slam dunk quite yet, but their early success last season at the latter half of the season, the transfer portal has been a big deal for Steve Lutz, and the recruiting class that he just signed, another massive ordeal. So if Chad Weiberg is the man with the vision that saw this coming, then I think all of us should calm down on any potential negative things to say at the moment. All right, let's hit a few comments before we get to segment 2 here. Big fan of the hire. Absolutely. Could not agree more. I'm doing good. How are you doing, Cody? Are you pumped? From Brett Gladden. I am super pumped, brother man. Next comment. I think this is a great hire. Us fans and big donors need to start donating. I just hope if his quarterback follows him, it'll give Haney a fair shot. I still believe in Haney's run. Yeah, I think if it wasn't somebody like Drew Mestamaker that is already shown to produce at this level, that has a lot of affinity, obviously, for Eric Morris, then, I think the sweepstakes for Haas Haney would be much more advanced. But I do think that if he does bring Mestamaker with him, and all indications seem to be that's a foregone conclusion, right? Even before Eric Morris accepted the Oklahoma State job, there was a lot of conversations about how, well, wherever he goes, he's taking his quarterback with him. And that makes sense, right? He was the only coach in America that said, hey, I think you can play college football, right? So he's going to have a super attachment, and that probably does change things for Haas Haney. Hopefully this allows Zane Flores to stick around, though. I think he's shown enough to be a competent backup in this league. Let's see. Pay to keep Haney, release Flores by all means. Again, if he wasn't bringing Messmaker with him, then I would say absolutely you got to go for broke on Haas Haney. But if he is bringing Messmaker with him, and he does have this track record of John Mateer and Cam Ward and trying to get Baker Mayfield to Washington State and Drew Messmaker, I have faith that if he decides, right, if Eric Morris looks at film and says, you know what, Zane Flores is better than people think, I want to pitch for him to stay, I'm all for it. And likewise, if it's Haas Haney, yeah, whatever Eric Morris wants to do when it comes to quarterback, he's got our blessing for sure. Next comment. How about them Cowboys? You're darn right. I'm so happy that we get to celebrate Christmas during Thanksgiving. I can tell you that every Jack and Coke is going to taste a lot sweeter now. Every lager that goes down is going to go down knowing that Oklahoma State put themselves in a position that not a lot of schools in the country have the availability to do. The only school that really jumped the gun was Virginia Tech getting James Franklin. And we may or may not have Mike Gundy to thank for that, right? Mike Gundy supposedly made a comment that, or Robert Allen was talking about on his radio show, that if Franklin reached out to him, he would say, don't go to Oklahoma State. It's not the right job, X, Y, and Z. And then Franklin takes the Virginia Tech job. I was a little perplexed about how Virginia Tech could get a coach before us, but now the UCLAs and the Penn States and the Arkansas of the world are kicking themselves saying the same thing. And I know that because I've had some Arkansas people reach out to me today, and Eric Morris was very, very, very high on their list. But we have to be thankful for Chad Weiberg and Ross McKnight, Chad Clay, all of the other donors that were involved in this, because that seemingly is the problem in Arkansas, is behind closed doors, there's some infighting, and the donors don't exactly agree, and they can't come to a consensus on what the NIL budget should be and what the paying salary should be. And evidently, Oklahoma State told Eric Morris all of the right things, that we're not going to deal with all of that, right? The NIL collective that we have is much better than most people realize. There seems to be this, ridiculousness that Oklahoma State is so broke that we were going to be one of the last teams to be a part of the coaching search, which I never understood that. At the same point in time, it is very evident that we've got more than enough to be competitive. We should not be 1-9, 1-10, 1 whatever with a $13 million roster. That should never, ever, and even if 13 is on the high side, let's say it's an $11 million roster. You still shouldn't have what is happening, because I would imagine Houston doesn't spend 11 mil. They might spend close to it, but the NIL is insignificant if you spend it on the wrong dudes. We have the money. We just identified the wrong dudes for the most part this season. It's not a mistake that the last handful of games are a much better product, and it's without a decent number of the dudes that were getting the bulk of the NIL. So the guys getting the most NIL money, not really playing a whole lot. The guys barely scraping by in this NIL world, they're the ones that are providing all of the spark. And thankfully, they're now putting some things on film that Eric Morris and the staff can evaluate and make a distinction on whether this is going to be a good fit or not, so on and so forth. You get the drift. All right, so we are going to jump into segment 2 here, and then we'll circle back around to comments and everything to that nature. But before we do that, ladies and gentlemen, we got to talk about the bee's knees for all of your betting needs, which you already know is FanDuel. The NBA is back, and there's not a better place for you to get in on the action than with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you miss the start of the game, or you just want to make sure that you ride the hot hand at the end, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who's going to score the next bucket to who's going to hit the game winner at the end. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into same-game parlays for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game much more exciting because your investment level has increased, especially when it's your team that's making the late push. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet is a winner. So make sure that you head on over to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Now we get to roll right into this. So with this kind of idea that he's probably going to bring Coach Cassidy with him, Skylar Cassidy, to be the defensive coordinator, and offensive coordinators. Could he bring the coach that's currently there? Yes. Could he reach out to a Seth Dahey or Graham Harrell? Absolutely. The defensive side of the ball needs to be shored up. But I do think that if Coach Cassidy had more at his disposal, then perhaps we could see an uptick of the defensive side of the ball. Coaching-wise, though, the only difficulty I find with Greg Richmond coming back is that would probably squeeze on one of the only coaches that has definitely proven his worth to come back next season, and that's D-line coach Ryan Osborne. So, unfortunately, I do want Greg Richmond back, especially if he brings guys like Braden Knox and some of those front seven individuals with him from North Texas. But I would hate to see Deshaun Brown leave. Not Deshaun Brown, sorry, Ryan Osborne, because of the development of guys like Deshaun Brown and Landon Dean and Sidvini Hafili-Kafusi, Jaleel Johnson before the injury popped up. It's been kind of, a who's who every single week because of the development up front, which is primarily because of Ryan Osborne. Even in the recruiting landscape of things, a lot of the recruits that are out on the trail, they have a lot of glowing things to say about Ryan Osborne. So if we don't get Greg Richmond, hopefully it's because Ryan Osborne is staying. If we do bring in Greg Richmond, Coach Osborne might be one of the few coaches that will be sad to see go. But if we can find a way to keep him, I think we absolutely should do that. Clint Bowen, he's done more than enough to have a place at Oklahoma State in some capacity moving forward. Now, granted, Eric Morris is going to bring in his dudes, as he should, but there's always going to be, some leftover recommendations. And I would imagine some of those leftover recommendations would be Ryan Osborne if he doesn't bring Greg Richmond with him. I think that Jules Montanar has done more than enough at the cornerback spot to at least get a little bit of recognition. Dean Marlowe, he's able to get out there, throw on the cleats. Perhaps he's responsible for some of the development in the defensive backfield room. That should be worthy as well. But the two dudes that I feel like you just absolutely have to pay to stay no matter what happens would be Ryan Osborne and Clint Bowen. I think Jules Montanar would be a very, very good prospect. Corey Patterson, the running backs coach, again, just reverting back to the recruiting landscape things. He has a very good name, and the recruits seem to like Corey Patterson quite a bit. Another big thing in all of this, I think this brings a lot of the recruiting class back home. You've seen Carter Langendorfer come back, Aiden Martin come back. I think that Trey McLaughlin now is very much still in play. Taj Overton, yeah, he committed to Mizzou. Yes, likely they're going to pay him a ridiculous amount of money. But, Drinkowitz's name is being mentioned in some of these other openings. So if Mizzou has any turmoil, I do think Taj Overton could find himself back in Stillwater, Oklahoma. Katie Batman Jones, do I love the way that it went down and then committing to another school within a matter of days? No, I don't, but I'm not ridiculous either. He is the best player in the state of Oklahoma. He's the best running back for sure, and he would be a carbon copy of a Justice Hill type of dude at Oklahoma State. Now, if Hawkins comes over from North Texas, if Rodney Field stays, obviously that could complicate some things to some degree, but that might be the most exciting part of all of this. Whenever you do have conversations with some of these recruits, if it was an Eric Morris or a GJ Kinney or an Alex Golesh, everybody was pretty excited. There were some people that were very excited about Zach Robinson, but not really in the recruits realm for whatever reason. Maybe it's just the lack of name. The connection a lot of these recruits have had is a decent number of Oklahoma State players that are starting right now. They have had said previously, if North Texas or Texas State was bigger, I really liked what Eric Morris and GJ Kinney were doing. Like, we've heard that quite a bit. So now we get to be the beneficiaries of that. So a lot of these dudes that came to Oklahoma State, they got recruited by Eric Morris. And there's a decent number of them that legitimately felt like if North Texas was bigger, if North Texas had more national availability, then perhaps that would have persuaded them to make a different decision. Thankfully, Oklahoma State has a lot of things going in its favor, which is why we were able to acquire the talent that we did get. But the biggest thing in this is the quarterback development. The second biggest thing is I think that it keeps most of this recruiting class intact, if not even adding more layers of enhancement. Because if we're hearing Oklahoma State players say that, I really liked Texas State, I really liked North Texas, but this just had more facilities, it had more marketability, visibility, profitability, the ability to put myself, on film against other top 25 P4 teams. You remove all of that, North Texas, Texas State have an argument to half of our roster. So if we're talking about keeping some dudes together, we have to identify the guys that need to get paid the biggest amount of money. So this is going to piggyback a little bit off of that Pistols firing deal we covered the other day where they went over their top 20, right? Predicated upon PFF grades. And the top PFF grades were Jaleel Johnson, Rodney Fields, LaDainian Fields, Haas Haney, Kyron Duhan, Wendell Gregory, Eric Fletcher, Armstrong Nodum. The beauty of this is I think all of those guys, with maybe the exception being Haas Haney, is 100% in play at this very moment because of this hire. The next of the group was Malik Charles, Tajay McCoy, Gavin Freeman. I would imagine that Malik Charles likes the position that he's in. Tajay McCoy might be somebody, being an Oklahoma dude, that would feel pretty comfortable. Gavin Freeman, he's been, the cream of the crop for wide receivers at Oklahoma State for the most part of this season. I don't see why he would want to leave, because especially if you're coming into an offense that is going to put up ridiculous points, why would you not want to be a part of that? And then you had Shamar Rigby, Austin Kweki, Grant Sigrin, Jacoby Sanders, Nuku Mafi, Deshaun Brown, Josh Ford, J.K. Johnson, and Trip White. Those were the top 20 according to PFF. I want to expound upon that a little bit more, especially now that we're doing this live thing. So they'll have some interaction in here. If you look at Oklahoma State's roster and you go past all of the fifth year, sixth year, seventh year seniors, there could be a couple that do factor into this, but by and large, I think you can kind of jump past those dudes. And then you get to Cam Abshire. Has he done enough to stick around? Probably. Is North Texas going to bring a ton of talent at wide receiver? That remains to be seen. Deshaun Brown, sure, you got to keep that dude. Tyler Brumfield, I think it would be nice to see him stick around. 6'6", 320 pounds. He would have started this year at tackle if it had not been for injuries. Landon Dean, I would love to see Landon Dean stick around, right? He's been biding his time. He's finally getting some opportunities, and he's definitely making the most of them. Hopefully Jaleel Johnson comes back. Noah McKinney, right? It is what it is. I was showing my king. We haven't seen him. We don't know what's going on, so perhaps not. Trip White absolutely needs to be somebody that we try to stick around. I would like to see us try to retain Rashawn Bradley. Chendavian Bradley. We haven't really seen what he can do quite yet. He's been more of a special teams dude. If he can completely buy into the culture, 100%, you could potentially see this former 5-star All-American blossoming at Oklahoma State. I think Jacoby Sanders is an absolute must. So is Grant Sigrin. So is Gage Staniland. I really think that we should at least put together an effort to keep Sesi Vailahi. Kyron Duhan, 100% need to keep that dude. I think we should make another pitch at Josh Ford. It'd be the same as the Katie Batman Jones stuff. Do I love the way it transpired? How fast that it did? No, I don't. But if you can get the dude back into the fold, you absolutely have to do it, because if you can keep Oklahomans in the state of Oklahoma to be part of the resurgence of Cowboy football, it is going to matter more to them than most everybody else. I think that's imperative. Yeah, Shamar Rigby, I think he's done more than enough to get an invite to stick around. You got to keep Rodney Fields. You got to keep LaDainian Fields, Eric Fletcher, Wendell Gregory. Yeah, back up the Brinks truck, Ollie Gordon style for Wendell Gregory. Trey Griffiths, yes, I'm in on that. Nuku Mafi, absolutely. Armstrong, Nodum, for sure. Jacoby Oliphant, got to keep him around. I like what we're seeing out of Luke Webb recently. I love the Cowboy culture buy-in from guys like Gunnar Wilson and Jalen Beckley and Royal Capel. Miguel Chavez, another one of those injuries that we didn't really get to see what could have been. But Kobe Foreman, right? We've seen number 22 pop on here and there. We need to keep that dude, Riker Huff, keep that Owasso pipeline rocking and rolling. We finally got to see Matrell Lopez. We need to find a way to make sure that he sticks around. I think the same could be said about Cam Powell, Carson Suesu, Jordan Viborni. Those two dudes are going to be the future of the tight end position. And then, of course, you got to keep Carl Vion Young. Let me know down in the comment section if I miss some dudes, if I should add some dudes. What do you think? All right, here we're going to hit a few more comments before we get to segment 3 here. Pop this up. There's a reason we never saw Floors. Should have believed Gundy when he said he wasn't ready. I don't know that we should be trusting Mike Gundy's quarterback assessments. Mike Gundy was a legend at a ton of things. He's the greatest we've ever had, but quarterback evaluation, for whatever reason, was always a difficulty for Mike Gundy. Does he save the recruiting class? Yeah, I do. I think so. I wholeheartedly think so. I mean, guys, a lot of these recruits didn't commit elsewhere because they were waiting on this. And a decent number of the recruits were told the last time they were in Stillwater, hey, if you could kind of give us some time, we'll have a decision by the end of November. So if you could give us till then, we think you're going to like the position that Oklahoma State puts themselves moving forward. And most of those dudes did wait. The only two guys who decommitted and immediately committed, well, the only one who immediately committed was KD, right? Taj Overton was a few weeks later. But outside of those two guys, everybody else hasn't committed elsewhere. Are they taking visits? Sure. Are they announcing other offers? Absolutely. But they strategically were waiting on this. Now, as we discussed on the show, if the clock would have struck midnight on the 29th or 30th and we hadn't named somebody, then the recruits were going to feel a little uneasy because that's not what they were told. So, yeah, I do think that because we told the recruits to wait till the end of this month and we did exactly what we were hoping to do and nailing the hire, now we can obviously tell the recruits, hey, this is good to go. This is a done deal. I think most of this class, if not all of them, comes back. And then plus you're going to have some of those fringe 4-star dudes that maybe chose Baylor or an SMU over a North Texas just because they weren't going to give the recruiting or scouting profile that a Big 12 school would. So those fringe guys that passed on North Texas because they just weren't quite up to the level that they needed to be at, those dudes now are going to circle back around to Eric Morris because now he's at Oklahoma State. If you're a wide receiver, running back, quarterback, you're going to want to play for this system. And that is why the fit here at Oklahoma State, I think, is absolutely massive. Let's see here. A few more comments. We got to pay to play. Yeah. So the the latest speculation I had seen was that we were trying to spend around 18 mil in NIL this upcoming year. No clue if that's accurate or not, right? But we spent 13 mil on this roster, and it's just we gave money to the wrong dudes. So who's in charge of NIL at Oklahoma State? Who is the dude that gave all of this money away? Whoever that guy is probably one of the biggest issues as it pertains to this particular roster. It wasn't the amount of money. It was the guys that we identify to pay that amount of money. That was the biggest obstacle. As a Texas Tech fan here, am I supposed to be happy or sad that a former Tech player got the Oklahoma State job? Either way, it'll be interesting game next year, Wreckham. Yeah, again, I correlated this to the Colin Klein conversation. If Joey McGuire was not doing what he was doing, then I would feel less confident about this hire. That's why I was reluctant about Colin Klein, because it feels like it's only a matter of time that he's going to take the K-State job. And if you're seeing what's happening in Manhattan right now, they ran Will Howard out of Dodge. The fans too, so they've got some culpability. But they ran that dude out of Dodge for the Avery Johnson era. It hasn't gone all that well. And now there's some reluctancy on whether Chris Kleiman's the right dude, which I think is a little crazy. But he did what the Tech fans or what the K-State fans were clamoring for. And now you don't know if Chris Kleiman's going to be there 3, 4, 5 years from now. So there was reluctancy on my part for Colin Klein because of that. I don't have those same reluctancy moments when it comes to Eric Morris. So we need Joey McGuire to keep rocking and rolling in Lubbock, so that way we can enjoy our new shiny toy for at least a decent amount of time. Love the hire. Hopefully the new coach will retain some of the offensive analysts. Why? Frank, why? Why would you want to keep any of our offensive analysts, buddy? What about Landon Cleveland? He's insanely talented. I just, I don't know that he's completely always bought into Cowboy culture on a consistent basis. Athletically, there's nobody in this chat that is going to sit up here and say that Landon Cleveland is not more gifted than Parker Robertson in every metric physically known to man. But there's a reason Parker Robertson has excelled so much this season. There's a reason that he gets the bulk of the playing time, even at the beginning of the season when it didn't look like Parker Robertson should have been on the football field. So I do think that the talent of Landon Cleveland could match up with him being kind of, a locker room leadership presence. But I don't know that that's happened quite yet. Could Eric talk Ford into coming back? Yeah, probably. Every quarterback looks to a tight end as a security blanket, and things are naturally going to move a little bit faster in the Big 12 than they are in the American. So you would assume that there would be a good safety blanket conversation. But at the same point in time, I think that both Jordan Viborni and Carson Suesu were likely to be the future next to Josh Ford at the position anyways. So, yeah, you got to make a pitch to try to keep Josh Ford. But if it doesn't work out, I do think that you have enough talent at the tight end room to pivot here. Next comment, with the ascent of Houston Cougars, do you think that's what hurt the Cowboys and the Houston recruiting? No. The only thing that hurt the Cowboys and Houston recruiting is that we didn't spend a lot of time down there. And I know that it's been enough time now. I think I can safely say I know that because I was recruiting the Houston area directly for Brian Nardo. And he told me we don't have a lot of representation down there. I was going down there for a lot of 7-on-7 stuff. And so I was in Houston pretty regularly. And, we had a few kids that I was watching that we were recruiting. So I was able to send, messages directly to Nardo of videos of players like playing at these events. And we just didn't have a lot of coverage, right? We focused on the DFW area. We had some guys that would go out to West Texas. We did recruit Houston, but it wasn't an emphasis area. And I think the correlation you can make to what Houston has done is Willie Fritz brought over 7 or 8 of Tulane's best players with him to Houston. It took him a year to kind of, get the culture figured out, but now they're off and running. That is something that I think Eric Morse is bringing to the fold here. And I think that is something that Chad Weiberg was, curious about. He wanted somebody that was going to bring in at least the least amount of questions possible, right? Not any hire was going to bring every coach, every player. That was obviously it's not possible. But if you can get a coach that says, I'm going to bring you my quarterback, my running back, my best wide receiver, my offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, offensive line coach, if there's a coach that's interviewing that says, hey, I can bring this entire package to Oklahoma State, that's going to carry a lot of weight, because that is precisely what Willie Fritz did at Houston. That's even what Lance Leipold did at KU. I remember when he got the job, and the next season there was multiple Buffalo players. I was like, why did he think bringing a bunch of Buffalo dudes to KU was going to work? And guess what? It did. It's because he brought the guys with him that knew how the implementation was going to go. He brought guys with him that he knew could play at the next level. And I think that is precisely what Eric Morris can bring. And I think that's something that Chad Weiberg was very, centered in on. Frank, I need whatever you're drinking. Yeah. Frank, you need to hold on, Frank, go back to that. Frank, you need to explain why you think we should keep our offensive analyst and what offensive analyst you could be referencing. There's enough analysts that surely there's a decent number of them are good enough to potentially stick around. But at the same point in time, I want Eric Morris to completely reimagine the offensive innovation that he can bring to Oklahoma State. And if that means getting rid of a bunch of individuals, so be it, right? I'm all for it. All right, last but not least, Oklahoma State officially has national championship number 55. We will circle back around to football before we get out of here. But we have to kind of give credit here, because national championships in any sport at any point in time, they're difficult, right? I think all of us fully understand that. But Oklahoma State not only won this, we weren't supposed to win it, by the way. Iowa State was the favorite to go away with this national championship. But Oklahoma State does it. And the beauty of it is we probably could have had a guy who won it, but you saw Brian Massow kind of tail off there at not towards the end, but 3/4 of the way through. This was on TV, by the way. I did get to watch the last few miles. But, Ryan Shope, Brian Massow, Dennis, Faoud Masadi, they all finished kind of together. And Brian Massow has been a national championship level individual already. So the fact that we were able to get a bunch of dudes to kind of cross all around the same time, that's absolutely phenomenal. And our 57 points is the third lowest tying NCAA history. So shout out to Oklahoma State for getting national championship number 55. People can say what they want, right? They can give the Cowboys a hard time for claiming a national championship in a non-revenue sport. But getting that is difficult, right? There's a reason that we're one of the top teams in the country in national championships. Yeah, a lot of them come from wrestling and golf. And now we get to, continuously prop up cross country. This is Dave Smith's 6th national championship while being the head man at Oklahoma State. So shout out to Oklahoma State cross country for getting another national title brought home to Stillwater, Oklahoma. Yeah, it's going to be exciting to see what the indoor track season looks like, because that used to be an afterthought at Oklahoma State, but we're coming along. We're recruiting legitimate sprinters and high jumpers and stuff now. 15 years ago, that wasn't the conversation. If you were one of the top sprinters in the country, Oklahoma State wasn't even near the top 50 of your radar. So Dave Smith, through the success of cross country, has been able to build Oklahoma State track up to a respectable level. Last year we finished 14th in the country in men's and like 18th in the country in women's in indoor track, which is monumental for us given where we came from. All right, so let's hit a few more of these comments before we do skedaddle on out of here. I do want to see Frank come back around. because I want to hear his take on the analyst. All right, next comment. We need a good kicker. I mean, you know what? Hopefully, if we're talking about bringing people back, since Gabe Panikowski didn't even get to sniff the football field this year, perhaps he's got another eligible year left. I don't think so. But the dude who won like the equivalent of the kicking Heisman at the FCS level hasn't even got to get an attempt. And there's videos of him out here kicking like 63 yarders inside Boone Pickens Stadium, and he hasn't sniffed the football field. So hopefully he's an individual that we could potentially bring in. Didn't we just, I know I'm supposed to know this. I want to say that we recently got, maybe it was Panikowski. I don't know. I thought we'd got a very renowned kicker recently, but I don't know. You need whatever Frank's drinking. Yeah, me too. Me too. What's our NIL budget now with Morse? The rumor is 18 mil. Right. That's kind of some of the things that I'd seen pushed around and channels. We spent around 13 this year. The objective this next year will be around 18, which I do believe would put us third in the Big 12, right? Texas Tech spent 28 mil. BYU seemingly spent somewhere around 20, 21, 22-ish. So if Oklahoma State did, in fact, spend 18 mil on this next iteration of the roster, I think that would put us right there in that third, fourth range in the Big 12. But, guys, let's face it. The 13 mil that we spent this year should have equaled a better product. I don't want to keep beating down Houston, but I'm pretty sure Houston only spent like 10 point something mil on this year's roster. This 8-3 Houston team spent less than we spent on our 1-10 team. So it's not always about the money. Yes, you have to have enough to be competitive, but that's another reason why I respect Oklahoma State and Chad Weiberg for making the decision to fire Mike Gundy when they did. Not to mention the fact that if you would have let him coach out the rest of the season, we would have owed him like an extra 2.73 mil or something to that effect. But you need to get ahead of the curve, and you need to be understanding that you can have money, but if you don't spend it in the right area, then it doesn't matter. Frank said that was a typo. Okay. Well, you know what, Frank? There's probably at least a couple analysts offensively that are worth their weight in gold. I know that there's some guys like Justin Gordon. He's a defensive analyst that 100% should get an opportunity to stick around. So there are some analysts that are definitely worth their weight in gold. Zach Allen is another individual who is worth his weight in gold. I know he's kind of, hovered around and had different roles, but by and large, Zach Allen is a pretty good representation of a dude that probably deserves some more time in Stillwater. Another comment here from Cherokee Ranch. Another college football podcast, quote-unquote, expert. Good Lord, this stuff is out of control. Everyone living out of their sportscaster dream. Okay. Good one, Gooch, Chooch, Cooch, whatever your name is. And I'm definitely not an expert. I don't think I'm an expert on a whole lot in life, but I'm working on it. Hopefully offensive and defensive line is the main focus. Yeah, again, I think Greg Richmond, if he were to come with Eric Morris, would be a great thing for Oklahoma State. And he does have a connection to Taj Overton already. So that would be good for recruiting. Anywho, I reckon that's all we're going to have for this one right here. Thank you all for jumping on here. Very exciting times. Yeah. Offense is going to be back again in Stillwater, Oklahoma. North Texas, we went over the defensive statistics. They are good enough defensively to obviously put them in a position to potentially play in the playoffs. But there does need to be an emphasis on defense for Eric Morris moving forward with Oklahoma State. This likely means that Jim Knowles is unfortunately not coming home. And this also, unfortunately, probably means that Eric Henderson is not going to be the next defense coordinator at Oklahoma State. But I do like Coach Cassidy. I like the fact that his brother Braden played here. Their dad, Mike, coached here under Bob Simmons. So the Cassidy connection in Stillwater does run super, super, super deep. And perhaps with more talent, more resources financially, better facilities, and better strength and conditioning, yeah, maybe that's all he needs to get a top-tier defense, and he can get it at Oklahoma State. Oh, wait. Can't wait to beat KU next year. Hopefully, Nose wasn't big on recruiting. I think everyone realizes in today's landscape that is not optional, right? Mike Gundy wasn't necessarily big on recruiting either, but even he realized that I gotta get with the times. Unfortunately for Mike, he waited too long to fully embrace, the recruiting and transfer portal market. But anywho, that's all we're going to have for this one right here. As always, I love you. God bless. Go Pokes. Thank you for tuning in to make this your first listen here on Locked On Oklahoma State. You could be anywhere. So happy you choose to be here. Do me a favor, hit the like button if you liked it, dislike it if you didn't. That's okay too. More importantly, share, comment, and subscribe. My podcast and people out there, you're everything that makes this work. So we appreciate what you do. Go do what you do. Hit the stars. Leave some reviews. Alrighty, y'all. Later, taters.